The 12th, 2022. And this guy, my name is Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers, of City TV's Breakfast Television, of course, City Line. I am a garden expert, four-time best-selling garden author. My family has two garden centers, one in Bradford, one in Barrie, called Bradford Greenhouse's Garden Gallery. I am here each and every Sunday morning to talk to you a little bit about the world of gardening, to get you going and growing, to get your garden of Whedon to turn into the Garden of Eden, to get those bugs and slugs out of there. That's kind of the goal. For those watching for the first time, each and every week we're here to answer your questions. But at the same time, we have a wonderful community that watches us. And with that, if I don't get to your garden question in the comments, a lot of the times the community itself will go in there and answer and offer suggestions. And that's what this is all about. Matthew, hey Frankie, it's Matthew from Guelph. How was your mom's birthday? And yes, I got William Shatner's autograph last week from Niagara Comic Con. Let it go, bud. My mom's birthday was fantastic. Desiree, good morning. Frankie from Brantford as well. It is an exceptionally rainy morning here in Southern Ontario, and it has been a little bit wet over the last few days. So there's a few things that I want you to consider. After the rain today, our gardens will be very nice and moist. That's going to make the ideal time to get out there and to weed your garden. When you pull weeds when the garden is nice and moist and or wet, you'll find the weeds come out really easy. So a good time to weed. It's also a great time to use a water-soluble fertilizer like a Miracle-Gro. They can go out and fertilize the garden. I know it's already wet and you're like, what, you want me to water more? But applying that fertilizer to the soil when the soil is moist and or wet will allow the roots to really absorb it and to take it in with great efficiency. So after that rain, you fertilize, those plants will go boom. The other thing is that's going to happen this week is that in Southern Ontario, temperatures are going to go on the rise. So we had all this moisture. We're going to have some warm temperature. And what I expect over this week and by the next weekend, we're going to see an increase in bugs and disease in our garden. So what are some of the bugs that we should be watching? Well, coming up right now, we are coming into prime. What month is it? You know it. It's June. So if it's June, what happens this month? Let me share it to you right now. It is the Japanese beetles and the June beetles that you'll start to see that will push into your yard. So you can see that the beetle itself, that's what it looks like. That's the adult stage. It'll go in there and it'll be eating your leaves and causing a whole bunch of different havoc. And this is the larvae, which is the white grubs. So there's a couple different things that you're going to want to do to control. You can see there's some of the damage that the Japanese beetles will cause on leaves. You can see how they'll go in and they'll eat roses. A lot of the times I see them on basil. You can see that even in this picture right here, how they're on top of each other. They're creating more grubs there. They're having a little bit of fun. So there's a couple different ways that we can treat these beetles. One way that we can treat these beetles is that we can use Beetle Be Gone. New this year, Beetle Be Gone. It's available at any garden centers that you go to, any home improvement stores that you go to. There are also people will recommend pheromone traps. Pheromone traps are traps that will attract beetles to them, and beetles will go in and they'll get trapped inside, and then you just discard them. However, because they are a pheromone trap, they will attract beetles from the surrounding area to that area. So always keep those pheromone traps away from those infected plants. We want to draw all the beetles away, trap them, discard them. Next way that we can control these things is to get rid of grubs, get rid of the larvae stage. And we can still treat for grubs at this time of the year. And now that we just had all this rain, it's an ideal time to put that Grub Be Gone down. And then after you place it down, even if you were to put it down this morning, we have additional rain this afternoon, the ground needs to be wet, it needs to be applied, and then wet in thereafter. That way, the bacteria, the Bacillus thuringiensis, forgive me, will go down and infect the grubs and kill them out. So that's one beetle I want you to look out for. Another beetle that you can actually use Beetle Be Gone on too, that I want you to look out for too, is if you have beautiful Asiatic lilies. And the Asiatic lilies are those beautiful things like Mona Lisas and many of those single stem lilies. And if you have these red bugs, and you can see these red bugs, these are an Asian lily beetle. A couple ways you can control them. Of course, you can apply that Beetle Be Gone. The other thing that you can do too is at this time of the year, if you take some time to take a look at your Asiatic lilies and look to the undersides of the leaves, and what you'll see is those little red dots. Those little red dots are eggs. So you can just squish those eggs. So as soon as you see a lily beetle, a red lily beetle, you pick, you squish, and you go around and you try to find all its eggs and you squish those eggs out. And if you have neem oil, or you can find neem oil, you can also apply neem oil. But if you see the adult stage of them, that Beetle Be Gone is an excellent way to control. So there's a couple tips that I just wanted to start off with on this day. Now what we're going to do is go into we got to go into some of the questions out there. Hi from beautiful Richmond Hill this morning. We got that from Diana. We got another good morning this morning as well from Deborah Jacqueline Peters. Good morning from Muskoka. Good morning, Frankie. Here's another question that we have. Maybe those bugs, those are the bugs I had. Yeah. So right now, this is the whole thing. I want you to really take the time over this coming week and the next several weeks to go in and take a look at your garden, look to the leaves of your plant, look for markings, look for damage, look for blistering. Now is when we're going to start to see a lot of insects because we've had all this moisture. Now we're going to have heat. Heat and moisture equals breeding grounds for disease and bugs. That's just what happens out there. So a reminder to take that time. Also, another reminder is that it has just, now that we've had our plants in our containers for a little bit of time, it's also the really important time as well to get out there and to really show and fertilize, that is to feed, because now some of our containers that we've had for several weeks, we've been watering. They're in a soilless mix. So at the garden center, they look great, but now if they're looking not so great, they need a feeding. So that feeding can be a slow release that you can put on there, like a Miracle-Gro Shake and Feed. And there's others on the market, or a water soluble. So the water soluble, I like using a water soluble and even a shake and feed combined. Good morning from Shelburne. There's another good morning there as well. We have Heather Fellows. Hi, Heather. How are you? There is an area I want to put a rose plant. There is an area I want to put a rose plant of any kind. I planted one, but it's not doing well. Do I need to prepare the spot in the garden? Soil, everything else is doing fine. It gets 80% full sun, lots of room to grow. So roses will always do good in more of an acidic type soil. So they always do well in a soil that's more nitrogen rich. So a little bit more peat moss added in the soil, but as long as the soil is well drained, it should do fairly well overall. If the rose didn't grow, what I would really consider growing is a knockout rose. Knockout rose have a greater disease and insect resistance. Fantastic variety. They actually use knockout roses quite a bit in Disney because they're heat tolerant as well. And even though we think we don't need heat tolerance here, we do, because our summers get so warm. We go from such dramatic swings. If I didn't use a knockout rose, I would look to a Griffin Buck rose, which is really quite good. And those are a couple suggestions that I would do. 80% full sun, as long as that 80% full sun is in the afternoon, not that it's just receiving all morning sun and then no afternoon sun. It needs an intense sun. So that intensity of sun usually happens by about 11 a.m. up until about 6 p.m. It needs to be getting sun in that range. If it's getting sun before 11 and only then, or after, let's say 4 in the afternoon, it may not be just enough sun for it. And instead, in that space where you have a lot of room and you want something to bloom, I would even consider using a fire and ice hydrangea, or even a little lamb's ears hydrangea. Even though the hydrangea varieties, you say it has lots of room, some of the hydrangea varieties, like a limelights, may get too big for that area for you. So you would maybe want to do a little lime in that area as well. So those are some options for you. Good morning, Frankie. My hydrangeas have light green leaf with dark green veining on them. I have certified. Oh, okay. Linda, sometimes that veining that you see, the dark green with the veining, so like the light green, forgive me, with the veining, that can be due to an iron deficiency. Sometimes that is a fertilizer. And chelated iron can actually help you out, or an iron-enriched fertilizer can help that out. That veining as well can be caused maybe even by a leaf miner in the inside of that leaf. But if it looks like a light green with the veining, generally that's a nutrient deficiency. So that would be more of an iron deficiency. So an iron-rich fertilizer would really help you out there as well. That's the same question. We have another shout out this morning from Alliston. Gail Walters, good morning from Alliston. Maria, good morning from London, Ontario as well. Let's see what we got here. Sylvia, good morning from Sylvia in Brampton. I have an early girl tomato. Beautiful. With blossoms already, and the plants are 14 inches tall. Is that normal? I've never had them bloom this early. It is normal, as a matter of fact. It depends on when those early girl tomatoes were put into sow, meaning into production, when they were started to germinate. The more mature plants, I have some early girl tomatoes in my backyard that I'm looking at right now that are flowering at 14 inches of height. So it's just about 12 inches, a little bit above. They will put the occasional bloom. So they're not that tall of a plant right now, what I would do is remove those flowers. So don't be fearful to remove flowers till that plant's more established. And even on your plants, if they are established, to remove some of the flowers, because then we can even size up some of the fruit. Sometimes what a plant will do to put flower on is if it's gone through a little stress, meaning it's gone through a little bit of a drought period, maybe dried out a little bit too long, it'll actually flower because it's saying to itself it needs to put seed on, flower, create a fruit, put seed on to survive. So I would just pick those flowers off, Sylvia, and you will be fine. Here we go with another question, and a common question that is as well. What can I do with chipmunks garden? What can I do to keep chipmunks out of my garden under my tree? Dun, dun, dun. So chipmunks, of course, they're going to go there and they're always looking for food. They are a food dominant creature that's always running around looking for acorns and looking for many different things. I've had great success with pelletized chicken manure. The pelletized chicken manure spread in that area might be enough just to discourage them out of the way. The other thing that you can do is sometimes even the placement of an owl close to that area. That chipmunk will see the owl and will stay away because the owl would be a predator to the chipmunk. You just got to move the owl away out of that area. Sometimes even if it's eating and digging into some of those plants underneath, animal be gone will leave a residual taste on those plants. And we'll take care of them. So always try to think what they don't like to see, what they don't like to smell. They don't like to smell chicken manure. They don't like to see owls, what they don't like to touch and or taste. So the Vitrix, which would be in the animal be gone, is something they don't like to taste, and they'll stay out of that area as well. Here we go. Another question. Good morning, Frankie. Do I apply a Beetle Be Gone now before seeing the beetle? No. You apply Beetle Be Gone as it's more of, you can use it as a preventative if you think there's maybe some around. But I would wait first to identify the insect first and then apply thereafter. There's no need to put too much on of anything out there. Good morning from Frankfurt. Any suggestion for sun-loving hydrangeas? Oh, yeah, indeed. Most of the large leaf hydrangeas are the ones that do better in part shade. But any of the PG hydrangeas, Annabella hydrangeas, Incredible. I like Incredible better than Annabella because it has a stronger stem. The limelights, I love the limelights because they are a strong stem with a big bloom, beautiful in full sun, beautiful as a hedge. I had them in my previous home as a hedge. Amazing, amazing plants, and they will do good in full sun. There's some of the little lambs that are fantastic in full sun, but any of those ones that grow on new wood are generally the ones in full sun that are better. So it's the macrophilias are the ones I would stay away from. So I would stay away from any endless summer varieties. Good morning from Kawartha Lakes, where it's a rainy one out there as well. Water levels today, guys, because we've been seeing lots of rain. If you are at the cottage, watching us from the cottage, you have some young children, just encourage your young children and even yourself to stay away from any of the shorelines. Of course, on wet weather, those shorelines, river, the lines and the side banks, the banks that is of rivers and streams, they become very soft and they're easily, when you're standing there, to actually crumble, you fall in, and we have something that's not the greatest. Had purple spots on my strawberries, dug them up, put in new. Now I'm noticing the same effect. Help. So these purple spots, probably on the leaf itself, probably a disease that's happening, a treatment of a fungicide. So there is garden fungicide that you can get. It's at a green bottle that you can find at your garden center. Apply that. Some of the purple spots, some of those leaves themselves, if it is the leaves, and it sounds like it is, just remove. The problem that we're going to have with strawberries is we have all this rain and moisture, and then we'll go to heat. We could get rot. In many berries, we will get rot, and that's more environmental, just too much moisture. So we got to really hope that over the next few days that we have, the best thing that we could have is like 2 days, which Monday, Tuesday are mainly sunny skies that we're going to be seeing, and a little bit of a wind just to dry things up. And once we dry things up, then if we get into the heat, that's ideally what we want overall. Let's go to some new messages as well. I don't know what I got going on here. So in the garden as well, this is a really important time that some of the perennials that have finished your spring blooming perennials, remove those flowers. Your spring flowering bulbs at this time too. Oh, here we go. Replying to Crank and Spock Bike Club. If you have a robin around, leave the grubs you will find visible. The robin will eat them, very much so. Hey, and if you guys need a bike, go to Crank and Spock up in Aurelia. Good people that are up there too. Back to deadheading. Remove those flowers, and also with those spring flowering bulbs, like your tulips, your daffodils, your crocus, any of those leaves that have turned yellow now, remove those leaves. The bulbs have sized up, and you can just leave them into their dormancy. This is for Ashley Brown. Hi, Ashley. What is an ideal location for the blueberry bush? Thanks for all your great information. Blueberry bushes will do well in full sun and acidic soil. So even if you had pine needles, or you have a spruce tree, or you want, even when you go to plant, to put it with a little bit of peat moss that there is in there to enrich that soil, a little bit of peat moss and some aluminum sulfate in a sunny location. It doesn't necessarily need to be protected from wind, but will do better if protected from wind, and you will do ideally. Here's another question we have from Rashid, replying to Frankie Flowers. Good morning, Frank. How can I keep squirrels out of my garden? They are destroying my vegetable garden. So once again, that pelletized chicken manure will sometimes discourage them out. I've even taken green plastic forks, and I've stuck them in around my plants, sticking out, so you don't really see them, but when the squirrels go up, it kind of bumps them a bit and will keep them out of that area. You can use chicken wire around the garden itself, but with squirrels, they can jump in. So a lot of the times you'd have to put the chicken wire on top. The placement of an owl sometimes will, like a plastic owl, will discourage them from the area. But the first step that I would try with is the pelletized chicken manure. That will do very well. If you can't beat squirrels, you got to feed them. If you can't beat them, you feed them. So you can even get a squirrel feeder, put it on the other end of your property. That will keep the squirrels away from your vegetable garden and put them over and keep them busy in another area. Good morning, Frankie. We got it from Deco or Diki. What can I do to get my plants to grow healthy? What can I do to get my plants to grow healthy? Number one, plant the right place in the right location. Okay, so make sure you get sun plants for sun, shade plants for shade. Next up, soil. If you focus on the soil, that's the foundation of any good garden. You have good soil, you're going to have happy plants when they're planted in the right location, because the roots are going to have nutrient that they can grow on. During the growing season, you want to remove any spent flowers, anything like that. Any sickly leaves, just remove. Keep an eye out for insects and disease that you can treat. And if you don't have that nutrient rich of a fertilizer, of a soil, then we want to fertilize. Easiest fertilizer you can use is just a slow release. I always recommend the shake and feed. You just shake it over the garden areas. It'll gradually release over time. That is the key. Good soil, right plant for the right location, a little basic maintenance. And then the other is deep and frequent waterings. If we're going through dry periods, we're making sure that the plants actually dry out a little bit, and then we water, but we soak in between the waterings, because then what we're doing is putting the water down a little bit deeper into the soil line. And by being down deeper into the soil line, the roots will stay deep into the soil, and that will really help. If we just kind of shallowly water, like we just kind of sprinkle, that'll only put water to the surface. The roots will actually go to the surface. Mulch is good too, because mulch will keep those roots nice and cool and will reduce weeding as well. Here we go. Another one. Good morning, Frank. Can I plant tulips and daffodils now? No, you're going to be planting tulips and daffodils in the fall. So you plant the bulbs in the fall. That's going to be in October for spring flower. So if you want tulips and daffodils, you want to do that a little bit later on. Planting in fall with the hope of spring. There's spring flowering plants that plant them in the fall. Okay. Ruth, my dogwood and wisteria had so many flowers last year, and this year, very few. Any ideas? Cold. So the dogwood and the wisteria, often when they will put the most amount of bloom on is if in the previous year they went under a bunch of stress. So generally the year after they go through a bunch of stress is when you'll see the most amount of bloom. Bloom production is seed production. Seed production is for them to try to keep themselves surviving. So that's why they're putting the flower that's on. The reason why they may not have bloom this year or as many bloom, maybe they were over fertilized last year with the wisteria. You see those little tendricles that grow off the sides. We got to snip those off because they'll actually reduce the amount of energy to the plant. And wisteria actually do way better when they're actually stressed. So when they're in more poor soils, not fertilized as much, a wisteria will do better. Dogwoods will do better if they actually have some fertilizer and things like that. But it could have been a late frost that could have knocked some of those blooms that are off. So just some maintenance pruning, fertilize the dogwood. I wouldn't fertilize the wisteria, and I would cut back any of those little sucker tendricles that are growing all over the sides. Do marigolds keep pests away from my tomato plants? Marigolds have often been planted around a vegetable garden or around many different plants because they will discourage some because they do smell. But I've seen rabbits eat the top of marigolds, and if there's no other food source around, they'll go. But marigolds are a good companion plant that you can put around certain vegetable plants to help. It'll help. It won't solve. It'll help keep some of those pests away. Another thing you can do with a host plant is around your vegetable garden, plant some nasturtiums. The beauty of a nasturtium is the flower itself can be added to salads to eat, but the nasturtium is a plant that will attract a lot of insects, and the insects will eat the nasturtiums and will stay away from your other prized plants. That's why it's called a host plant. Here is another question. This is from Desiree. How come after 13 years, my hydrangeas decided to bloom every other year for about 6 years now? So plants do have a little bit of a lifespan. Many flowering shrubs and even foundation plantings that are around your property, they are usually within a 20 to 25 year range. So upright junipers, spreading junipers, even things like potentilla, there's a time where they actually start to get really tired and weak and they're just old. And that's the time when you may want to remove, discard, and then replant. The other thing with the hydrangeas is that they may not be blooming as frequently and as often is because other plants in the area have actually grown and now there's less light. So with less light, they're not really getting as much growth. And with that, they're actually even sometimes suffering because other larger shade trees are starting to be bullies and take nutrient away from them. So what's grown around them are they more shaded now than what they were 13 years ago? If that's the case, then we got to do some selective pruning, maybe some additional watering, fertilizing. And if they look like they're just getting weaker and weaker and weaker, you may want to remove them. And now we'll get some of the more improved varieties that are out there. So those are the reasons. The other thing that you can do to stimulate that plant is you can take a sharp spade and go around just outside of where the foliage of those plants are right now. This is the hydrangeas growing up. On the outer side of where all the leaves are, just take the spade and shove it down into the soil. That'll cut some of those extended roots that are extending out. And by cutting some of those roots, you sometimes can stimulate that plant and shock it to make it bloom a little bit better as well. Another question that we have, Stacy, please help. How do I care for red pepper plants? New addition to my garden. So the red pepper plants, they like to have the soil temperatures warm before planting. So if you planted within the last week, you are good because the soil temperature are nice and warm. Pepper plants need a full sun location. Make sure that you're watering in the morning. Don't water at night. If they're dry, yes, indeed, water, but kind of avoid watering during the evening because if they sit wet through the overnight period, then what will happen is you'll get an increase in disease. What the peppers will benefit as well as tomatoes is from a calcium-rich fertilizer. So purchase a fertilizer that has calcium within. I actually have one on the table. You'll see that this guy here contains calcium, the shake and feed that's here with the red top. That will prevent any blossom end rot from the base of those peppers. That is when you think that you have a beautiful pepper and then you look to the bottom of the pepper and you'll see that it has somewhat of a scarring, looks brown and or even looks rotten. That's blossom end rot, happens on tomatoes as well. By using a calcium-rich fertilizer, that'll actually reduce the risk of that happening. So those are some of those answers from you. Delima. Good morning, Frankie. I have Gerber Daisy in the garden. Will they rebloom? Yes, indeed. So the Gerber Daisies, key about Gerber Daisies is deadheading. So there are many plants in our gardens that are annuals that will drop their flowers and continue to bloom. Like wave petunias, that's the key why waves got so popular is they're self-cleaning. They drop, you don't have to deadhead. But with dahlias, with your Gerber or Gerbera daisies, all those, and even geraniums, you need to remove those spent flowers. So once a flower is finished, go down to that flower stem, pinch it right off and or cut it off, and then it'll rebloom behind. If you're leaving those flowers on, that plant's gonna still put energy to that area. We want it to not put energy to that anymore. We want it to focus on new blooms, new buds, new flowers. So make sure that you're deadheading to go from there. We have a question from London. Penny, how do I protect elderberry from birds? So you can use some bird netting that you can use for the elderberry. Sometimes people will even put tinsel and it makes it look so unattractive, but even aluminum foil around on the elderberry bush, they'll stay away. Once again, that plastic owl is something that can help you as well. Those are some different solutions that you can do. Birds don't like even aluminum plates, the aluminum pans, tying those to the elderberry bush, that reflection of light and the movement of those guys, birds just don't like that. So those are some different things. It just makes your plant look pretty ugly overall. I just got my one son calling me there. So let me just do this. I'm gonna answer it live. Watch. Hey, Matt, can I call you back? I'll give you a call back in 10 minutes, okay? Sure. I'm going to call you in a second. I'm just on my Q&A right now. Okay, bye. Bye. My son wanted to know a login. Can't share that, but that's real life, you know? If your kids call, you got to answer the phone. That's my rule always, because they're the most important things in the world. So there's some questions from your elderberries as well. Here we go. What brand of black mulch is good to use? I bought some last year, but once I opened the bag, a lot of the pieces were brown. So I had to spend a lot of time picking pieces out. I want true black. This is from Heather Fellows. So there's not really one brand that I would say. You know, I do work for Scott's Miracle Grow, and I do know that there's a quality and control process to go through. That's one of the reasons why I do work and promote them, is that I've been and I've seen all the different quality control. Do sometimes things get through the cracks? Yes. You got to let people know. Yes, that brand, I would let that brand know, because sometimes what will happen is at the end of when they're doing their filling, some of those bottom areas won't have the true colors that are there. But I would go to some of those more like those brands. Like I would really tend to go, if you want that true black, if there's an issue with that as well, then there is recourse that you can go and actually reach out to Scott's. You can actually reach out to the retailer at the time and you will do well. But full disclosure is that I do work for them. I haven't used other mulch outside of that, and I've had great success. So that's the advice I can give you there. Here's another question that we have. How do I grow butternut squash upright? So this is for Christina Baba. So many squash plants, we can grow them vertically. So instead of letting them grow out, because we don't have enough space, is we can let them grow up. And by doing that, we can trellis them. So we can either put them on a trellis, or we can even use an arbor and have them grow over the arbor. The issue is once they start to get that fruit on, sometimes the weight of the fruit will actually pull and break it down. And you got to make sure the trellis is strong enough to be able to hold that weight. And then sometimes as the fruit's developing, you sometimes even have to tie in those stems, like with a twist tie or even a rubber tape that you then tie those stems so that you're supporting. So really what it is you're trellising. So as you're putting your trellis and that squash plant's growing, we're training the squash to grow up. So we're bringing it over to the trellis and or arbor, and then we're tying it on to that. You can use anything from, you can go to your garden center and get twist ties that actually have a plastic protective brand around. You can get rubber ties, so there's a tape that you can use. You can even use old nylon stockings and cut them into strips and use those as ties. And then you're tying, training, and then you may, when the fruit starts to get really heavy, you may need to support the trellis again, but you may even need to support those stems that the fruits are on. So there you are. Morning. This is from Tiny. What is the best fertilizer for roses? So there are several different fertilizers that are available for roses. Yeah, sometimes just even an all-purpose fertilizer will do well for a rose. There are roses need an acidic kind of soil overall. So what you'll find is sometimes the rose foods that are formulated, you'll notice that they actually have a higher first number. So the same thing that we would fertilize tomatoes with, we'd actually use on our rose plants as well. So I would just go to your garden center and, instead of getting specific fertilizers for a whole bunch of different plants, and then you have a garage full of fertilizers, I would get a good quality all-purpose fertilizer that you can use on everything, because the difference in percentages is usually not that high. What I would do with your rose is each and every fall is I would put a bag of sheep or cow manure around that rose plant that would then work in. That's going to put some natural, beautiful, organic compost nutrient into the soil to really help them out as well. And that would do very well. Do people tie their peonies up? Yes, indeed. Is there a better way? No, there's peony rings. So you can purchase, even a tomato cage can be used on a peony to hold it up. But you can even get peony rings that are for sale that will actually help that. Or you're putting stakes in and tying them up. I just tied my peonies. As a matter of fact, my pinks are finished blooming. I'm just looking at them, and my whites are just coming into nice bloom right now. If your peonies are not blooming, I wanted to tell people this one as well. They're generally planted too deep. So too deep planting of a peony, they won't bloom. Okay, here we go. This is what I love about the community. I use a cage, works amazing. See, that's what's great about this community, is that even some of the questions that I'm not getting to, but even to add further information, please get out there and answer some of the questions that you're seeing me not getting able to answer. I'm going to answer this last one, and then that's my half hour, and then I got to call my son. This is Elizabeth. She says, "Hi, Frankie. I have Trumpet Vine." It's a Trumpet Vine. It's 4 years old and has never flowered. Any idea why? Thanks. So Trumpet Vine need full sun locations. They do well in poor soil. If the soil that they're planted in is getting fertilized, maybe the fertilizer from the lawn, that's when you'll see a lot of foliage but no flower. The Trumpet Vine needs to sometimes even go under a little bit of stress. So allow it to actually dry in between waterings. Even take that same spade that I said, go around to the exterior and just kind of shove the spade in just to cut some of those roots and to shock it. And by reducing the fertilizer, maybe stressing it a little bit, should stimulate it to bloom as long as it's in full afternoon sun. If it's not in full afternoon sun, you'll just get foliage, no flower. So there you go. That's our half hour for this week, June the 12th. I hope your garden is blooming great. If you have any further questions, please put them on the chats here. We have people that are out there helping us answer as well. My website, frankieflowers.com, frankie@frankieflowers.com. And you can see me Monday through Friday on breakfast television, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on City TV, as well as Cityline. And once again, I'm here every Sunday. And let's just make sure that that Garden of Eden is your Garden of Eden. And let's just say that, hey, I love gardening because at the end of it, it feels better than therapy. And I get tomatoes. I can't wait for my tomatoes. This week, I think by the end of this week, I'll be able to harvest some lettuce. Perfect. And then harvesting herbs, we didn't get to chatting about. If you want to harvest herbs with the greatest intensity, pick them in the morning, put them in a little cup of water that you're going to be using them later in that night. Beautiful flavor, beautiful intensity. There you guys go. Happy Sunday, all. Stay dry.